If you've experienced any sexual or physical trauma, it is, I think, and I believe most of our jobs to send it back with blessings. But like, you don't need to carry that. We don't need to keep this separation going anymore, because I don't actually think it helps us die better. I don't actually think it helps us live better. So why would we want to keep carrying that? And it does take courage to feel, because you do have to feel some pain. But all this stuff that happens for people, that's really powerful, actually, once you get to know yourself in these ways and reclaim that energy, that it lives there.
Hello, and welcome to the Wild Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Willow Brook. Here we explore the divinity woven into everyday life, the beauty, the grief, the mystery of being alive. Through conversations with wisdom keepers, artists, and seekers, we listen for the truths that crack us open and the stories that bring us home. In this episode, I sit down with my dear friend, expressive artist Adriana Rizzolo to explore love, intimacy, grief, and the spiritual dance of devotion and wildness. Hello, and welcome back to the Wild Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Willow Brook, and today I am so excited to say that our guest is the wild and devoted artist, Adriana Rizzolo. Adriana is the founder of Body Temple Church and the creator of Body Temple Dance, a trance space that welcomes grief and rage to be transmuted into aliveness through ritual, expressive arts, including prayer-formance, and intuitive movement. She is a 13-year sober, trauma-informed, Tantra-aligned spiritual mentor, mystic, somatic healer, adult sex educator, and guide to the unseen realms. Welcome, Adriana. I'm so happy to have you.
Wow, that's such a great bio. I feel like that's like the first time that I've ever heard it where I was like, that sounds really good. Like, it's so funny, like how many years I've been like listening to people read my bio that I just kind of like black out when I write, or like ask someone else to write for me, because I'm like, this is horrific having to do this process. And that was the first time I was like, that sounds so cool, but also like so true. I mean, it's
so
always like
true.
true, but I'm just like, wow, that sounds really fun too. And like more me than I feel like other bios that I've had in the past or something.
I'm so glad you
It's
feel that way,
cool.
because we've helped each other with bios in the past too, just to
Yes.
be like, it's sometimes so much easier for someone else to help us
Oh,
articulate
totally.
what it is we do and who we are.
Yes, it's so true. I mean, especially on the feminine path, I just think like because it's so much about relatedness, it's like we really do need that mirror of remembrance. And it's just such a powerful force of acknowledgement and recognition that we also get to give each other. And I think that we take that for granted a lot of times on the spiritual path, especially like thinking we should just know, or that we're like doing all this practice so we don't need that or something. Like, I don't feel that. And I know you don't either, but like that is the current, I think, assumption sometimes when we step into deep internal practices in the ways that I know you also do. So it's really nice to be
It's
with
so
you.
important. Yes, I'm so happy to have you here. Well, I like to open up with a question related to love. And so I want to ask you, what is a current musing or something that is alive in you about love?
I feel like there's something kind of intense that I'm holding. And this morning I had this download around how our spiritual paths are like not about, because especially on the tantric path and even in some of my Italian shamanism work, it's like we're directly experiencing the divine within us. We're directly encountering that love. And I just had this really strong hit around the other side of it, because that's true. And I think that that's really important to name, because so often we feel like it's not attainable because of religion. And we feel like, oh, well, God's somewhere else and I don't really know. And I know that it's in me, but I don't know, like, we don't know that we can experience it. It's like learning about samadhi, like in my yoga teacher trainings. Like, it took a long time for me to be in an environment where it's like, no, that's actually something you could directly experience. It's not just like some other thing that's going to happen when maybe in another life or when you die, you can experience that. So I also just really felt this powerful transmission around how our direct encounter with love that's not the point. That the point for me is also to really be able to hold the difficult questions, because especially in Tantra, we're looking at God is in everything. And it's so easy to be like, oh my God, yeah, totally. Like rose petals. Like, yes, of course. Like you look at a rose and you're like, God is manifest in everything. And then you look at the genocide in Gaza and you're like, oh, actually, that's not true. Or you look at like our current political climate or so much suffering and you're like, actually, never mind. But I feel like for me, I just had this hit of my direct relationship to love is what helps me hold that reality. Like even when, and especially when I can't directly experience it. And so I'm really curious about the ways that that connects for me as opposed to just being a place where I immediately like shut down and push away and I'm like, okay, never mind. Like this isn't true anymore because this situation is so inappropriate and unjust and heartbreaking, to really feel into the layer of paradox that is like the transmission of, Kali in the form of beauty and love and like a lover or an innocence, the innocence of a child or like anything that comes through us and to us that's just so very clearly the goddess and the energy of divinity to like some of the most horrific things we're seeing and how there's that spectrum of being with reality. And for me, that's a big part of the point. And love with a capital L, meaning unconditional love, the moments where I can really soften into that and have I think that's why I hold those experiences so close and why I keep putting myself in environments where I can experience that because I know the value of being able to hold the paradox and I could see it also in my mentors and friends and teachers that that's really who I orient towards are people that can hold that really intense paradox that I find love puts us in touch with.
Absolutely. And I resonate with so much of what you just said because to me, love opens our heart even more and more. And I remember a certain point in my journey where I was like, wow, God is really like making a lot of mistakes. Like, why are we killing each other in this way? Like, God really must have messed this one up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really feeling like, how could this be a divine reality? And over the course of many years, it's always a question I'm holding. It's actually something I ask many of the people I trust is like, how do you see God in everything, even the things that break our heart the most? But to see, oh, what is the bigger picture that I may never understand, that I may never see? And as you were speaking to Adriana, I was thinking about the way that in our own intimate relationships, love is not always some beautiful rose garden. It's
Mm-hmm.
also really painful and really confronting and
Yeah.
really intense. And I wonder if you would share something, because you work so much with intimacy and
Mm-hmm.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
about the, I almost want to say the obstacles to love, but I think it
Yeah.
was you who first said the obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
And all of the things that we have blocking us from receiving that love or seeing it.
Yeah, yeah. And so much easier to say than to
Mm.
live, obviously. But I feel like, again, like all these really intense things are coming to my mind, of course, talking to you. I'm like, "Rah!" I work with couples here and there, but I love working with one partner because I just really love to help people get initiated into their being their own sexual and relational and love healers. So that's part of why sometimes, I mean, it happens in the couples as well, but it's like there's a lot more to sift through, obviously, when both people are there and you're like, it's a totally different thing. And I kind of really like working on let me get this side of the story while also acknowledging the other and that reality to whatever extent I can. But I notice this so much in India, right? Where when there's difference or when there's something that we haven't experienced before, which if we're growing in intimacy with a friend, with a lover, with a child, it's like we're going to confront things we haven't experienced before in pleasant ways. But even the things that are pleasant for sensitive people, one, I oftentimes find dredge up a layer of grief because then we're finally safe to actually feel that layer and process it and have the appropriate space for it, even though it doesn't feel like that at first. And I'm not sure it can always. But the other piece is the ways that when there is separation, there is difference, our minds want to assume that we know what it is or compare it to something that we do know, right? Like, for example, when we're in India And sometimes we take Westerners to India on pilgrimage, and it's like you could be eating something you've never eaten before, and you could be like, wow, it's kind of like nachos. And we're like, that's nothing like nachos. Actually, it doesn't even taste or smell or look like nachos. But it's like crunchy and has this other stuff on top that's kind of gooey and kind of squishy. So your brain is like, these are nachos, right? Like we know what's going on, right? Like, are you like we're safe, right? You know? And instead of being like, whoa, my mind is blown. I've never had this before. Like, what's going on? Oh my God, this is so intense and beautiful. And like, and your mind just can like freak out. But we're just not trained to let our minds or our egos freak out because it's like none of us had that training, or some of us did maybe, like I didn't at all. So like, I think that happens in relationship where it's like, wow, here's this difference. You're like this, I'm like that. It's not just like, this is so cute. I love that you're like that. I love how different you are. I would never think to say something like that or do something like that or live like that. And like, wow, so cool. Love that for us. Like, no, we're like, oh my God. I mean, like all the parts of us that want to control to create an environment where we're safe or we think we're safe, they come online, right? So that's why we do this deep work. And that's why intimacy is such deep work, because I think outside of the realms of like the great mystery and ultimately not knowing, which I think is also important, and that's what we're talking about, is like we're encountering the unknown, even if we're just getting intimate with our own bodies, with our own sexuality. Like I know that, you know, you do a lot of that work too, where it's just like we have to continuously encounter the great unknown, which means that we have to feel that layer of terror, or we have to feel that layer of pain. I mean, in a titrated way. We don't have to feel it all at once. And I don't recommend that unless you're really forced to, which grief does sometimes. But you can also find environments where you can kind of tease it apart and you can create with it, and you don't have to feel it all at once. So it's not so terrible. And it's also amazing because then we're also like getting death practice in, which like from my perspective, and obviously I'm like a very wild like person for some reason. I mean, that's what people say. I'm always like, I don't know who I am, but I'm also just like, I want to have a good death, and I know I can't control that. And I'm also gonna like get as much practice in as I can without like saying that very humbly as somebody who's like, I haven't experienced any really intense physical health crisis or anything in my life up until now. So there's a lot of limitations in my understanding around what I'm saying, but I also have experienced internal death and external death of people I've loved and have sat inside of those doors that have opened, and the intensity of those fires. So yeah, those are some of the things that are coming to me in terms of the obstacles, but also like I think what we all face too.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought it to a food metaphor. Not even just an example. I mean, we love food and we love eating. And that's such an accurate depiction too of like receiving these flavors that maybe we haven't tasted before, that we haven't known how to perceive. And I actually would love to talk about receiving too in that way, because so much of my life's path has felt like opening to receive the love that I want so deeply, and seeing all of the blockages and fears that I've had to really receive that, and all of the ways that some parts of me come and sabotage that. But we just did a whole offering around receiving, and I remember something you said in Body Temple Dance, this amazing embodiment practice that you lead, around now imagine you are receiving the thing that you think you want and see how your body responds. Right?
Yeah.
Like how do you open to receive?
I really relate to, what you shared about like almost like the whole path being about that, being
Yes.
like, wow, where do I close? Like, where do I close? Like, and even if I'm working with somebody, I mean, it's important to celebrate how far we've come. It's important to like smile at ourselves and with each other and like celebrate each other. But for me, it's also to be able to do the deeper work, because I think that that's really where the sustenance of our existence pulsates, and where we can actually recognize the sacredness that is right here in this moment, the preciousness, the heartbreak of even this moment that we're sharing. Like that is never outside of my awareness, or hasn't been in a while, meaning that precious, heartbreaking feeling like every day of my life. And especially in the ways that I feel so fortunate to be able to connect and to be able to feel as much as I can feel. It really is a gift, actually, even though it has definitely taken me into some really difficult places, both internally and externally. It's like people always like to say, like, everyone thinks that they're going to like find some way to like follow their intuition. It's going to be right. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. I'm like, how about just like let your intuition be wrong sometimes and like figure it out? Like, this is just how it goes. You're like living a life. You're like going to make the wrong choice. And then like you're going to have really good support. So I think support for me is the way that I receive. I'm very relational. I'm not attached, but definitely identify as neurodivergent and did have ADHD before like, social media existed, according to some, doctors when I was a kid and stuff like that. So I just am really relational. It's very difficult for me to do almost anything if I'm not on some level relating, which is also why I love relating to the unseen, because then I'm never alone, which is really helpful for me. But I do need like a fleshy heart. I need that in my life too. So you can imagine like relationally and intimately and love wise, when I was still living in the paradigm of my conditioning where like New Jersey Italian upbringing, even though I knew I was queer, I like hid a lot of that. And then also like was like define the man, survive literally. Was really intense, and dismantling a lot of that took and has taken a lot of support and continues to. To me, I'm like, we're all unhooking from these ways of being all the time that are actually allowing us to love more freely. One of my friends and teachers, Heidi Rose Robbins, has really been such an exemplar for me of this love in this impersonal way that really changes us, as a mentor, as a guide, as a friend, and has really showed me how to embody that compassion that for me really fuels my capacity to receive. It really comes from support, focusing in on these other ways of connecting.
Absolutely. And it really brings to mind the lineage of Tantra to me as you're speaking about that, because so much of what we're up to here at Wild Heart and Mirabai's work is around kind of definitely deconstructing the idea that our spiritual path is meant to transcend us out of our embodied relational reality, and rather that we find the divine in that, in the depths of that. And you've alluded to Tantra a couple of times, but I wonder if you could speak more to your lineage and to India, your relationship to India, and how you found your way to this path and what it is in your life now.
Yeah, it's a very long story, so maybe I'll think about a couple things that feel important. It's complicated because a lot of lineages, quote unquote, are not necessarily teachers, especially as you go, further back, that I would like promote as my teacher. So it's just complicated. I just want to start by saying that before I just start saying things that are just what I think people want to hear, because that's just the truth. And as somebody who wasn't born in India, but who spent a lot of time there, I also do really believe in how important it is in having and cultivating right relationship to the land, to the culture, to the people. And the way that I do that now is in part through one of my good friends, Varsha Chowdhury, who is a spiritual counselor and psychologist in Pune. And her and I are really close and do a lot of work together and spiritual practice together. Some of the tantric lineage comes through Kashmir Shaivism, but like I said, it's complicated. I mean, even if you think about Kashmir, it's like, I don't know, just look it up. It's not like I'm like going to Kashmir. It's complex, and it's something that really changed my life. I mean, I was really first introduced to it in a yoga studio in Brooklyn. I was learning how to be with sensation, learning the difference between being stretched in discomfort and feeling pain. Like all these things that are like so important to learn. So that really was my introduction to the philosophy of Tantra. And then my partner, Harshada, he has been leading pilgrimages there a really long time. And so my first trip to India, I was on his pilgrimage, and I was just introduced to the land and to the culture in a way that was so powerful. It really did something to me that created a miracle. I had a miracle happen about 4 months after I got home from my first trip in India, which was that I got sober. And it was something that I was like praying for so hard in the Durga temple, I remember. And just knowing that for me, that was a huge part of my path, but it was not something I felt like I had choice around or even language around. And that trip, that first trip to India, I was 29 at that point. I had been practicing and even teaching some yoga, but then going and being on the land and being in this lineage of lovers, which isn't just like a physical lineage of this teacher to this teacher to this teacher, although it is that, it kind of broke that pot a little bit, actually, for me, into this realm of unseen mystics, because the places we go in India are mystics. They were really kind of anti-religious, actually, and really did not fit the mold. And so it kind of introduced me to that. And then also working with these unseen forces. And as an oracle, I've always been able to feel and sense what was going on around me, but didn't have language for it, and started learning, wow, there's this field of consciousness. Like Sally Kempton was a teacher of mine back then that really helped me understand this field of consciousness that is Durga, this pattern, that we can encounter directly, and also allow our bodies to become temples for which we are in devotion to that. And I feel like the miracle that I experienced with sobriety was really connected to Durga and that whole lineage of lovers and mystics, that traversed culture also. The more over the past 13 years since I got sober, I've found this to be true in all traditions and across cultures, and then eventually in my own blood ancestry that comes from southern Italy and the Mediterranean, and how much that also has this pulsation of earth worship and mother worship, and this lineage where we use and work with the body as a vehicle for the energy, and to learn how to work with these patterns, these archetypes, these fields of consciousness, however you want to look at it, as real living power that we have inside, but that also exists all around us all the time in the form of nature and in you. So we really learn on this path how to access that, but also how to use that to be able to serve. And that really is what, for me, it comes down to, is being able to be of service to the extent that, I'm not giving or receiving, but I'm actually inside of this continuous flow of love that is also our true nature. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a little hard to answer. So that's
Oh, I
that's
know
my
it is.
response.
And I think I just value the conversation around lineage and
Mhm.
understanding sometimes, often, understanding how practices take hold for people, and to understand how we got to the place where we are, and with the practices that we have. And it is
Yeah.
complicated. There's many dimensions to it. And as you were speaking, and I think is so important too, as somebody who was raised in the West, is to do a little bit of investigation into my
Mhm.
own lineage, blood wise, as I did my ancestral pilgrimage many years ago, and as you have
Mhm.
too, and understand how to approach each tradition with a reverence, and also understand that there are complexities everywhere.
Yes. And it's about so much about the education. If you really immerse yourself in something, reverence naturally arises. If you really
Yes.
get clear on like what you're devoted to and what really resonates, it's natural to actually like want to receive the education, want to honor and uplift people that are indigenous to the cultures that we are learning from. And for me, I went to India 14 times before I ever went back to Italy, which is where my ancestors are from. And I don't know if I would have made it back there if I didn't receive so much. I do believe it and have directly experienced the soul, and do know we have soul contracts with places and people. And yeah, it's just like so much of our westernized and colonized minds as colonizers. I mean, I come from colonizers, and my brain and my body is colonized at the same time, that there is no separation or there's all this separation, and again, coming back to the paradox of like, can we hold both realities? That seems to be like the closest that I can experience in this moment of like how to bring actual reverence and also really honor who we are. Because if I'm not being myself fully, I'm not able to honor or respect anything or anybody, because that respect is coming from how I perceive myself. You can't pretend. Reverence isn't something you can pretend. It's like love. It's like belonging. It's like worth. It's like, it's who we are. And it takes practice and continual.
Absolutely.
It's
Yes.
fierce. It's a fierce path. It's like Mirabai Star always says, right? It's like it's a fierce and tender path. It's something that has to be really lived and integrated, and like that comes from like sitting close to that fire and learning how to hold it, and coming back to intimate relationship. It's the same thing. You got to learn how to hold that fire. Sometimes you got to learn how to let it out. But so a lot of times, for me, I got to learn how to
Dance in
hold it.
it. Yeah. Well, and it's actually bringing me back. We just jumped into the podcast, but I didn't tell everyone that you're one of my closest, dearest, most beloved
Mm,
friends. And maybe you're getting that vibe. I hope you are. But I'm remembering when I first met you, which was at a
yeah.
retreat with Mirabai. And
Yep.
I just came up to you at one point. I was like, Adriana, you're on fire for God. I'm on fire for God. And I see you. And let's dance in the fire of God. Like, whoa.
Yes.
And just feeling the sincere devotion in your heart. I really see your devotion. And I see your wildness because you also just like have this contagious way of your liberation is contagious. Every time I spend time with you and then I go away, I'm like, oh, I feel more free in my body. There's something that your existence gives so much permission to be free, to
Mm,
open to love. And I love that you hold both that devotion and that wildness.
mm.
And it gives me more permission to be more in both of those parts of myself because sometimes I've done a separation in my mind of what devotion looks like and then what
Yeah.
wildness looks like and that it's either or. And I
Yeah.
love that you're
Yeah.
both.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I also have had that. I mean, I grew up going to like Catholic church. It's like, girl, sit down, shut up. Like, and then in India, because it's not where I'm from, I'm not there just like whirling my hair around and twerking in the temple. You know what I mean? I'm like, rein it in, girl. Like, have the party inside. And that's what's so weird a little bit about my work at this phase is that like it has such deep internal practice. The subtlety to be able to recognize that people like you, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this do, it gets perceived in different ways. But that's what's so interesting, right? Is like it really also comes from reining it all the way in, like to the point where I'm like, I am not okay reining it in to this level. Like, oh my God, like how much can I hold? And I love that too. Thank you for sharing those reflections. And when you were saying that, I just was feeling so humble because I know that in some way, on some level, I have no idea why that is the way it is. Like, I don't know why when I do what I do, that is the effect. And I'm mostly just so humbled and so grateful for it because I could be doing so many terrible things in the world and I'm not. So like that feels so good on a karmic level. I'm like, thank you, Goddess, for giving me this life and this opportunity to serve in this way. I have no idea exactly what's going on or why I'm the one that you're doing this through, but thank you.
I'm here to let you know that getting on our Wild Heart email list is the best way to stay in the loop about upcoming events and everything we're up to here at Wild Heart. Receive our musings on divinity in daily life, feminine wisdom, embodied writing, and grief as a spiritual path at wildheart.space.
And on another level, I really feel that it's come from a lot of mistakes that I've made. And it's come from like being really unconscious in relationships. And it's come from being the child of an addict. And it's come from feeling really intense pain and having moments of trauma come up where I'd self harm and like just dark shit that I've also moved through with support. That is also a part of it. That's a part of the story. It's like, wow, I'm a really imperfect person. And that is part of what has taught me to trust myself. Like, because I've had the support in my life and the karma, or I'm not sure, the grace in my life to be able to see it that way, you know, because I have people in my blood family who don't have that opportunity, who don't get to see the mistakes they've made and the pain that they carry in ways that like actually help them wake up. You know, they just live in that and they just see themselves in that and they don't have this opportunity to like directly experience the divine and like forgive themselves. You know, it's just not a part of their story or their curriculum or their path, you know? And so like I also just feel like it's not about me on like such a deep level. And that's also what makes it like fun to be like, well, this is all I have. So I'm glad it's working for you. And also like, yeah, I am completely wild about God because if I wasn't, like, I would not be alive or I would definitely not have the life that I have. And I don't take that for granted. You know, I mean, I'm sure I am in a lot of unconscious ways, but I don't want to take that for granted. You know, that's so important to me. And you know, I'm so grateful that I've had these opportunities to self reflect and, you know, all these things we just do all the time. You know, we're like, oh, no big deal. Just like tuning in with the divine and like writing this thing and people are like, oh, what do I do? You know, I'm like, girl, you're doing it. Like we don't even realize how much like grace we have just by being able to self-reflect and look at what we do, like period, just to be able to reflect on what you did in the past like month in your relationship and be like, how could I do that better? Or like, what do I need? Like, how am I not saying what I need? Like, these are huge gifts that we've been given. And I think that we're all doing a really good job. And at least most people probably listening to this podcast, I don't think everybody in the world is doing a good job at all. But I think most people tuning into Wild Heart and to this space and that are connected to you, Willow, like, we are doing a really good job. And I think mostly that's why I'm so celebratory, not because I don't think it's time to grieve and moan and rage. And we do all that too, because I think we want to have access to that and to the ways that we can transmute that into our power. But I also know, like, so many of us need to be celebrated because we do work hard and we do have this grace in our lives that asks us to keep showing up and serving.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up the mistake part because again, the obstacle is the way, right? Like all of the ways that I think I've messed up, it's like only deeper opportunity I feel to connect. And I'm starting to feel that way in my relationships. I used to be so afraid of conflict. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
most people are. I'm actually kind of confrontational when it comes to conflict. But now in my life, when I have some kind of rupture or like, ooh, an uncomfortable moment, I'm like, if we get through this, that means we're stronger,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And that there
Yeah.
is this gratitude I feel for having the desire to go to those places and to have people who want to go there with me. It's
Yeah.
what a gift.
Yeah. And it's like so interesting because like a lot of my family, my birth family on my dad's side, I don't speak to a lot of them, including my brother. Like there's a lot of addiction, a lot of heaviness. It's intense. I mean, racism, I mean, all kinds of things that I'm just like, oh my gosh, like get me out of here. I had to really separate, or I chose to separate them from them for really good reasons after my dad died, which was 18 years ago now. And when I went back to my grandfather's funeral last October, he died right near my dad's birthday, actually. I chose to go to the funeral because I was like, I wonder what it's like to be around them. And like, is probably one of the only chances I would have. And it was so interesting because there was so much healing just in the fact that like we were family, like this like weird karmic thing that I just felt also just like as emotionally grateful that like these were the people, even though I like completely am like outraged by like what they believe in so many ways, it was like these are the people I needed to be born. This is the family I needed to be born into to do what I came to do. And like those words are just like blah blah blah, but you know that direct experience when you have that. Like if you've had some shit in your life and you've encountered some wounding and you've had things that you've confronted, you also have this other experience sometimes of like, oh, that's what makes me so available for people in these deep, wide, vast, uncomfortable, painful places without judgment. Like truly just can hold. And I don't need to hold it all for the record, but like I can hold like I have such a wide capacity for what I can hold that also comes from being born around these kind of crazy, but also they were very funny, which made me also grateful because I was like, oh my God, so it's part of why I'm funny. And like if I wasn't funny, oh my gosh, my life would be horrible. Like truly, I would hate this all if I didn't have a sense of humor. I can only be friends with people that have a sense of humor. Like truly, like where I live in California, sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't be friends with this person because like I'm like, you're not picking up any of the jokes I'm putting down. Okay, this is like not the right thing for us. I know we're spiritual, but like, oh my God, if
Can't take
like
it so
we don't
seriously.
no, and I just like you need to laugh. Like we cannot hold the paradox without laughter, without just like ha 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 ha. Like we need the vibration of like our laughter and our like sobs to be able to hold and carry as much as we do without collapsing, you know? So I just value all of it so much and even that experience I had just in this past year of like returning and now I'm like I think we should do a family reunion, you know, but just like for one day or like a dinner. But like
Little
we'll
taste.
see. I'm willing to test it. But like yeah, I'm like, "Oh wow, this is so interesting because there's also something in that in our blood and where we come from that yeah, it's just it's so yeah, again, it's complex, but there's a lot there for us to learn and receive and be in touch with.
Totally, totally. And I've found in my early 30s now, I can say, the journey of returning to family, like looking at my family as an adult and looking at my family in more of a conscious way and how it's it's
Mm,
not always easy, right? Like Ram Dass says, if you
mhm.
think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
Yep.
And also for me, reckoning with the complexity of birth family and estrangement and the adoption that's in my family, both in my dad and being adopted by My mama Marna, who died, oh wow, I almost said 30 years ago, 10 years ago. I am now 30. And
Wow.
I'm so glad you're bringing, I mean, Pete is in the field. I would love for you to
Yeah.
speak about your dad and your
Yeah.
experience of grief and whatever is here right now.
Yeah. Thank you. That feels fun. The way that you just asked me, which like says so much about you, Willow, and like you as a grief tender and grief holder, and um the way that you asked it, I was like, wow, I don't actually know what my relationship to my dad in the afterlife is in this very moment. Okay, wait. No, that's not true. That's so not true.
What about
Okay, this is
Rome?
no, totally, I forgot. Yes, my father died when I was 24 unexpectedly. He was an addict, but like in the closet addict my whole life, so I didn't know he was an addict until after he died. Until the day he died, actually, was when I found out. And my mom just like said something about drugs, and I was like, "What?" And it like didn't really register then because I was on drugs, so I couldn't like fully comprehend it, but I also just had no idea. I was close with my dad. He flew small airplanes. He was a wild person. So he was a functioning addict most of his life, you know? So it's weird because when you think of like hardcore addicts, you have this idea, but it's like also just a part of so many people's lives that we don't know because it's so hidden. Understandably, that's the nature of addiction, is that it's needs to be hidden. So we ended up burying him on my 25th birthday, which was obviously like a very inconvenient day for them to have to bury him. And it was also just a very traumatic experience for me and my mom and my family. Like it was just like not a good situation. And since then, so for the past 18 years, you know, there's been so much grieving, of course. It's like 18 years of grief. And it looked everything from just completely disassociating from it, just numbing myself to the point where I didn't have to feel it for some years, to screaming in the shower 6 years later out of like the most intense emotional pain, even though I was like, what? Where's this coming from? But then eventually from the work that I do, knowing that it was rooted in that and in this unprocessed grief, right? Trauma in some ways, and in the somatic sex education world, we say is unintegrated and unexpressed emotion, you know? So that's what gets built up in our bodies. So there's been so many layers, and even the way that I understood my relationship to men and patterns with men and patterns with like money and patterns with my self-confidence, and it was like I was like living out my relationship to him in this like weird way because he was dead. So I think in some ways it was easier for me to see it because I was like, it's not like he was around. So I feel like, you know, this progression that then ended up leading, I'm kind of fast forwarding, obviously, but we'll be here for 10 years if I don't. Fast forwarding through these years of healing and feeling like, wow, like even his death anniversary went from being a marker of my trauma that would send me into like a huge spiral for the whole month of April into like a marker for my healing. Like truly, not just in my mind, like actually a visceral marker for, wow, this is what set me off on a healing path. Was when I saw him at his deathbed, a mantra came to me and I didn't even know I knew the mantra. And that grace initiated me in some way into something that was very mysterious and something I did not pay attention to for a while that then just kept coming for me, that I eventually started letting in and started devoting my life to. That's really what set that off for me spiritually.
Grief is not a mistake. It is a sacred response to the profound love that we carry. Whether your loss is fresh or long held, our grief community Holy Lament, with Wild Heart co-founder Mirabai Starr, offers a space of companionship, creativity, and soul-deep transformation. Through the alchemy of reflective writing, poetry, shared witnessing, and sacred song, we invite you to explore the healing landscape of a grief circle full of loving presence. This is a spiritual, not clinical container for those ready to turn toward loss and reclaim it as something sacred. Learn more at wildheart.space/holy lament.
And so even my experience of him in the afterlife started changing, where like I'd be in a healing session and somebody'd be like, do you know someone named Pete? And I'm like, oh, I can't even like be in a healing session with this bitch getting up in here. Like, come on, like let boundaries, like she's trying to learn boundaries. Okay. Like get out. Like when you grow up with an addict, like you have no boundaries because their need on that internal level, it takes up the whole room. So you also learn how to have no needs. Hence I'm 43 is still learning how have needs and like fully express them without just, raging or collapsing. And I know I'm not alone in that. And so they would be like, he's just like bringing this really intense light and just really wants you to know that he's so sorry and he's here to support you in your work. And like so many times in so many miraculous ways, and everything from that to songs to then learning about my Italian ancestry. His grandmother is the place that I went back to, his grandmother's village in Calabria in southern Italy, and learning all these wild ways of worshiping the Divine Mother through dance, through drumming. They would have orgies and like all this like deep healing music, and really repairing my relationship to him through this process of ancestral repair. And so it's interesting because when you first asked me, I was like, I don't know. I think like he at some point became this more collective energy. When I go to this place sometimes where I don't have any cell service where I live, and that's sometimes where I communicate with the dead and the unseen because there's no cell service for some reason in my body. I'm like, oh no, I can hear everybody more clearly. I don't know. That's just how it is. And for me. And I was listening and it was like, I am the sun. And it was like this transmission that like he wasn't this individual soul, but that he was the sun, like the sun in the sky sun, this like frequency of sun. And I had another experience where like mystical experience where that energy came down through my body when I was on a hike and I fell to the ground and was sobbing and was having this whole moment of the Father is in me in this new way. And so I've had a very weird and wild mystical experience with him in the afterlife, and a lot of pain and a lot of so many other things. But I think right now, and on his death anniversary, I was in Rome and I had this mask made because some of my Italian ancestors would work with masks, just like many indigenous cultures do and have in terms of ritual space and trance work. And so I had this mask made before I was going back on this ancestral pilgrimage and this Black Madonna and Mary Magdalene pilgrimage I just was on and also was leading. And I wanted to do this ritual on his death anniversary in Rome, and I did it. But the interesting thing was that the day before, my friend Nico, who was doing it with me, was like, we should do it at the Vatican. Because it was her first time in Rome, and I was like, I don't know, the Vatican, it's like so lame. And like also just like, is that the place we might get kicked out? Because it was a dance ritual with the mask, and it wasn't like a big thing, but it was just like specific thing. And wearing a mask around a bunch of tourists, like it's a little bit weird. And like in the Vatican, there's like rules and whatever. Of course, it's the Vatican. And I was sitting there having my little cappuccino in the cafe, and I was like, actually, that sounds like kind of an epic idea. Because the thing about my dad is everything was always extra. And so there's this part of me that, like, especially being a recovering addict, I'm like, let's just make it extra. And then let's just see how fun extra can be. So when we decided to do that, we woke up that morning to go do the ritual, and it was the day that the Pope died. And we loved that Pope because that Pope was really amazing. And it was just so wild because I was like, we were already going to the Vatican, and it's my dad's death anniversary, and I have this whole thing with the church and blah, blah, blah. You know, it goes on and on. The patriarchy, learning how to worship with our whole body, like taking a group of women into like a crypt underneath the church for the Black Madonna where we were like crying and dancing and spinning and prostrating, and all of that happened on that same trip. So I think my relationship to Pete now is like a little bit elusive and filled with nostalgia, like when I look at photos and every once in a while, like watch a video or listen to a video and I like hear his voice and I'm like, whoa, like I don't even know that voice. Like my consciousness doesn't remember his voice. No matter how many times I listen to it, because I've listened to it quite a bit over the years. I've turned these VHS tapes into MP3 so I can watch these videos. And I'm like, who is that man? Like, it's so interesting because he also just died. I mean, I wasn't that young. I was 24, but that's pretty young to lose your father. This very interesting relationship. Some parts of my body really know him and know it and know how important it's been for my journey. And then I also feel like I'm in such a different world that it's also really easy to just kind of forget and disconnect from all of it in a lot of ways too. So thank you for asking and listening to the spiral of like
Of course. No, I love hearing about Pete. And obviously, so many of the people that are here with us in Wild Heart are with us in the Holy Lament grief community. And there's so much relief I feel in hearing other people's stories. And especially for you being 18 years since his death and me just crossing that 10-year threshold. And I think I talked to you on Mother's Day, or bereaved Mother's Day, and just feeling that like, okay, let's get through this day. And this year on Father's Day, we're going to do the Temple of Shakti retreat in New Mexico and honoring the father in many ways. And I feel also inspired by the ways that you continue to unfold that process for other people too, and yourself at the same time of really, looking the father in the face.
Yeah. Oh my
Even if
God.
it's the sun.
That'd be a good
I'm
prompt.
like, yeah, but that totally would.
Looking the father in the face. Let's go. 15 minutes. Set that timer, Mirabai.
Yeah, I mean, hey, everybody was listening. Why not? I might do it when we get off. That would be
I'll do it
great.
too. I have some writing I have to do, but I love that. It's true because Marianne Woodman, who's an incredible psychologist, and like, I really find her teachings are deeply spiritual as well. But she always teaches about this basement man, which I just love so much
Right.
in our psychology of like, because I've also studied a lot of Jungian psychology and have mostly been in a lot of treatment with Jungian psychology. So I really understand it through my lived experience and dream work and all that. The basement man being the part of us that would rather die than ask for help. And I just have such a visceral experience of that with my dad's death. And then with these parts of myself coming back to receiving, coming back to why we would choose to engage with our grief as opposed to just like, I don't know. I've had so many people I know whose fathers died in the past 18 years. And I'm always like, they're not obsessed with it. What happened to me? Why am I so obsessed with this death? Obviously, I'm sure you could relate, right? You're like, everyone else is just okay, moving on and kind of shedding a tear once in a while, but not talking about it. I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, do you want to talk about it? You want to share a memory? Like, hell, it's like we find each other as grievers. And that's why that space that you all hold is so powerful because we need that. We need people who are also awkwardly like navigating these things that are otherwise so pushed away and rejected in culture, and even death. So we're so death phobic, of course, and it's intense. And to be the one that brings that up, even when someone close to someone might be dying, it's like incredible how many times when I'm working with somebody and I'm like, is he dying? Just like asking that question, they're like, oh my God, I don't know. I mean, nobody said that to me. The doctors are just saying like, yeah, it's going to work and this is going to help. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, that is also an option. And also they might die before you anyway. Why don't we just talk about it? Like that's a lot to hold when we're alone with that feeling. You know what I mean? And
I know.
yeah, so I'm here for it, even though
Me
I'm also
too.
avoiding my own grief all the time. I mean, please, it's like,
Of
it's never
course.
ending.
But there are some of us that aren't afraid to talk about death, or that somehow I feel that I, some part of me dies if I don't. There's some part of me
Ooh,
that's like, I have to talk about death. And remember, you started off talking about the practicing of our own death, right? That's such a huge part
mhm.
of the way I approach life. And it feels like yeah, it's not for all of us necessarily. And it feels like something we need to reclaim from the
Mhm.
shadows of
Mhm.
denial. And
Mhm.
whew, yeah. And
Yeah.
I have to bring this up because as we're talking about death, right? It's those taboo things, death, sex, and money that
Yeah.
you are so good at bringing to the surface and dancing with. And I am so
Yeah.
grateful for that. And I want to bring sexuality into the mix too before we end
Yeah.
because, and you read something right before we started recording that
Yeah.
said something about your teachers in India and what they taught you about sexuality. I wonder
Yeah.
if you would read that and
Yeah.
talk about your journey as an adult sex educator and
Yeah.
whatever you want to share about that.
Yeah, I read this little piece of an essay that's in this book called Witch. It's an anthology by Michelle T. That has all different stories, mostly of different queer writers and artists, stories of what it means to be a witch, which is really fun. And I feel like is such good medicine. So definitely check that book out if you're interested. But this piece just says, a lineage of wild lovers born from the sacred hills of India taught me that to ignore our sexuality is to reject death and therefore life. And I'm not going to open up that entire door of a story. I have so many stories. But I will just say some of my experience with the goddess in India woke up this energy in me that I perceived for a period of time to be this like all consuming sexual energy. Like I really had this initiation of waking up in this bliss body. My whole body was kind of buzzing with this pleasurable energy. And that experience, although it took a really long time to integrate, I'm very grateful for now, even though it kind of destroyed my life and then also carried me through to the next life that now I'm living. So it's complex as per usual, given my life. But along the way, I've met some really amazing women that were also also everything from yoga teachers to somatic sex educators. And my teacher, Deborah Sundal, who I also am in a grief process with because she died just about 2 years ago on May 20th, I think. So it's coming up on her death anniversary. Thank you for reminding me. She taught somatic sex education and specifically about female ejaculation and orgasm for 40 straight years from the early 80s. And it was such a pioneer. Like every somatic sex educator knows who she is. She's a legend in that world because she really did a tremendous amount of research through women's direct experience, meaning holding space for women to explore their bodies and become their own sexual healers. And she was also a big fan of Hildegard of Bingen and, this not just concept, but experience of the womb as the universe as the womb, so taking it into this cosmic place, but also this very physical place, our vulva, sharing sex education of our anatomy, which is just healing to hear because most of us were not given any sex education that was accurate or appropriate, never mind all of the physical and sexual abuse that many of us have either endured or inherited. So she really played such a crucial role in my life because I began understanding some of the dynamics of how to work with sexual energy and the bliss body and the chakras and these systems and mantra and sound and, all these different ways.
Do you long for a spirituality that honors both fierce truth and tender mercy? I know I do. If you're not aware, in 2019, Wild Heart co-founder Mirabai Starr wrote the luminous book Wild Mercy to uplift the electrifying wisdom of mystics and goddesses across the spiritual traditions. This book continues to inspire people of all genders, including me, to embrace the holy mess of being human, to honor our desires as sacred, and to recognize that our bodies and the earth are not obstacles to overcome, but vessels of the divine. You're invited to dive deeply into this wisdom with Mirabai in our online Wild Mercy retreat, where we will explore 8 women mystics and goddesses across the spiritual spectrum who carry special medicine for our times. Highlighting themes of longing for the divine and justice making, we will support you in forging an intimate relationship with these wisdom beings as living allies on your journey. This is an invitation for people of all genders who yearn for a more wildly creative, tenderly inclusive space for transformation. Join us at wildheart.space/wild mercy.
I was starting to piece things together, but she really brought it into the physical realm for me, which I so appreciated, I think, as a Taurus, but also as somebody who's just always a little bit like once people get too far into the bliss realms without a connection to their flesh, I'm like, hello, you know what I mean? Like, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets. What is your biggest fear? Fear. Boundaries. And I'm like, come on, like rein it in. So it just intuitively, I'm always dancing in the opposites. So even for myself, I'm not making fun of anybody. I could only read sacred poetry for a period of my life. That was the only thing that made sense. So trust me, it's not like I'm not speaking from direct experience. I was not okay with the world and being in a body at all. And that was actually my embodiment initiation, which is hilarious because it just took me all the way out of my body basically, or showed me how far out of my body I was maybe. I don't know the difference, but that experience and then meeting Deborah, I studied with her for like 5 years, and she really encouraged me to share this work with women and really empowering women and people with vulvas to not be afraid of their sexuality, not be afraid of their bleed or their perimenopause and menopausal seasons, not be afraid of the power of their orgasm, and that everyone can orgasm if they want. Everyone with a vagina can ejaculate if you want to. This is from 40 years of research. She would say that, and I know it's true. It doesn't mean that everybody has that path or cares or wants to, but I just also think it's important to like keep sharing that message with others because some people are just really heavily trained because of trauma and the fear that gets instilled in us in that trauma to fear their own body and to just go kind of avoidant around it or only experience the anxiousness around it. But it's your body. And I think it's a part of some of our journeys to really encounter that and be in touch with that in ways that are helping us to feel more settled and more free and more whole within our own experience. So I'm very grateful for Deborah Deborah, and she died very suddenly. And I hosted her for the last retreat she led in person in Austin, Texas. And so I'm really grateful that I got to study with her, and also that she shared some of this knowledge and work with me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for all those in the world who are helping to really invite us back into that knowing and into our bodies and into the
Mm,
divinity of that. Bringing it back, and you do that so well. I
mm,
know when you were talking about the universe, the way I approach or have come into sexuality work more recently is through birth
mm.
work, through
Yeah.
my training as a doula, through understanding the way that all of life is created. And
Yeah.
somehow we separate sexuality from birth too. There's this deep
Oh my
disconnect
God.
from sexuality and life and how they
Yeah.
are inextricably connected, and how strategic it has been to divide that in our
Hmm.
religion, in our
Hmm.
societies, in the patriarchal world we live in. And wow, it
And it's just
is.
because of however many mostly male-bodied men's unprocessed trauma. But that's not ours. And most of these people are dead anyways. So send that shit back. Like, that is not your responsibility. And it's not your fault. And if you've experienced that, it should have never happened. If you've experienced any sexual or physical trauma. And it is, I think, and I believe, most of our jobs to send it back. With blessings, sure, fine. But like, you don't need to carry that. We don't need to keep this separation going anymore, because I don't actually think it helps us die better. I don't actually think it helps us live better. So why would we want to keep carrying that? And it does take courage to feel, because you do have to feel some pain. All this stuff that happens for people, that's really powerful actually, once you get to know yourself in these ways and reclaim that energy, that it lives
Absolutely.
there.
Because it is our life force. And I see how much everyone is impacted by that. Men, women, people
Hmm.
of all
Of
genders,
course.
of the restriction of sexuality and the distortion of it. And how I just feel like there is a readiness to relearn, to
Hmm.
remember
Yeah.
the holiness of the
Yeah.
body. And Adriana, let's end by you talking about body temple, because this is so obvious. Body temple, I'll just say a little bit from my
Mm.
perspective. It's a liberatory expression of the soma of the body. I was just dancing outside this morning in the sun, and there's something about, if I think about being in body temple, how much you invite the fullness of our
Mm.
expression into the room, of like, now do the weirdest thing you can, like don't look good.
Yeah.
Disrupting the idea that dance has to be some like sexy perfect thing. That
Mm.
it's a practice of wholeness, of grief, of aliveness,
Yes.
of
Yes.
ecstasy, of despair, of
Yeah.
anything. and
Yes. The full
and so
spectrum of
anyway.
emotion.
Oh yeah. And maybe you can just say a little bit about body temple and what you do in body temple. Obviously that's a huge
Yeah.
thing, and I'll say a little bit too of whatever I know that you didn't say. Tell us
Yeah.
about body temple.
I mean, over the years has just become the umbrella for the work that I share, which a lot of my passion lies in training facilitators to be in touch with your body in a way that you have to be willing to be afraid a little bit. So we lead facilitation trainings in body temple dance, and then people teach, including myself, body temple dance all over the world. There's classes in Poland now, I just found out, which is really fun. And it's a small school kind of, I guess, I don't know, but it has a lot of volume in it, meaning like there's a lot of power and a lot of energy. People really come to move their bodies, to listen deeply to the divine within them and have a place to share that, or just to unhook from the codependent pattern that they're experiencing in their relationships or with money, or just come to bring the mess, or come to ignite their writing. Like, we're really good at igniting creative energy. I did dance when I was very young, but I hated choreography. And then I found ecstatic dance in 5 rhythms throughout my journey, healing journey in New York City. Studied with a lot of great teachers in 5 rhythms, including Kate Shilla. And over the years, just started learning different other forms, dance alive, Gaga, I did for a while. That really felt like it was helping me process my trauma. And I wasn't fully getting that, although the somatic meditation work that I do and have received is a lot about that also. I had to also bring this movement, non-linear practice into it. I just need to be able to dissolve and soften completely into the air, because I love the air. So it only feels that way. And I'm totally softening and like spiraling my arms or spiraling in circles. And then it's also connected to my Italian ancestry. There's a lot of grief ritual as well as eros rituals where we dance and we invoke, we spin for a long time until people puke, and we channel eros. And like, it's my teacher, Alessandra Bologna, is wild. If you're interested in Italian shamanism, go find her. And like, these kind of trance dances are also in my blood. So once I learned that, I was like, and I learned that like years after I started doing Body Temple, and I started leading Body Temple because people were just asking me. And then once the pandemic happened, it was like so many yoga people, I think, were like, oh my God, I cannot teach or do yoga like on my little mat by myself, and like wanted this more nonlinear, expressive practice that honors our emotions as doorways into the divine. Following the root of an emotion, it becomes unbound energy, and that's not easy, or sometimes for me, most of the time, not possible to do alone, but in a group, it's so much easier. So yeah, that's a big part of it. And then we have a sex education portion that's connected to what I was just sharing about Deborah Sundall's work that we still share. So we have a Yoni temple where we meet monthly, and some trainings there that's called Shameless Goddess. And that's the book that I'm actually writing, is called Shameless Goddess, and is going to be connected to all of these delicious and juicy practices, but also kind of funny stories and terrible stories and intense things that really help others feel less alone on their journey of being terrified of the power within, because that's normal, because that's what we were taught, but that's not the end of the plot.
Absolutely. So we will link all of those in the show notes, anything we've
Thank you.
referenced, and highly recommend Adriana's Body Temple membership, which is amazing. They dance every Friday virtually, and also get in there with all the womb work and any of that that calls to you. It's amazing. And any opportunity you have to be in person as well.
Yes, Willow, come on our retreat. We're doing a retreat in June. It's going to be
Yes.
so good.
Father's
And our
Day
membership
weekend.
opens Taurus season and Scorpio season. And now we also have like mama circles, and we go between partner classes so people can bring their partners, and also parenting, somatic parenting circles. So we have like a song circle, every month. It's like we have a nice, full, juicy curriculum that you don't have to do all of. You could just choose a couple classes a month to drop back in to your body and get some creative juices flowing. It's really fun. And it's mostly just an incredible community. Like, everybody that comes is just like, you have such a cool community. And I'm like,
It's
I
so
know.
fun. Yeah.
It's so good. They're so good,
And
these people.
I know. And Adriana is also teaching Body Temple at our Ordinary Mysticism writing retreat in Taos in October. So it's such a beautiful way to open up our creative channels, as you were saying, every morning as we're writing together. We'll be singing. It's incredible. So
It's
so
so
happy
good.
to have you here, Adriana. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you, Willow.
would you just leave us with one little nugget of something to chew on and taste?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the thing that is like right here in front of our face is the rose. And I mentioned her before, but I'm doing a really deep dive with her right now, just personally, meaning really welcoming her into my life in infusions and tea, and also in baths, and, really tapping into the messages that she wants to offer. So I think the little piece that I want to leave us to chew on is to just communicate, with the plants in your life. And especially if you're feeling stuck in relationship or stuck creatively, it's a really powerful way to start to listen more deeply, to get, the next layer of information that wants to be expressed, whether it's through writing or through a sound or through a breath or through a conversation. There's so much liberation that the plants have to teach us, and so much support and allyship, but also mirroring. And especially with the rose, I really feel like a daughter in the rose lineage, in the sense of like, it is the fierce and tender wisdom that we do carry within us on the path of the feminine. And she's can be right there in your mouth, on your table, in your bath, and just honoring that and listening and seeing what arises.
Beautiful. I love you so much. Thank you
I love
for
you, and I love that
blessing
we're
us.
wearing red or shades of
Of
red.
course. Always aiming to wear shades of red. Thank you,
Lots of love,
Adriana.
Willow.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, and I
Thank
look
you.
forward to connecting, and for all of you to be connecting with us in the future. Thank you for tuning in to the Wild Heart podcast. Check out the show notes for links to connect with Adriana and see what we are up to at wildheart.space. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review to help others find this wisdom. We're so grateful to have you as a part of our community, and we look forward to welcoming you to a future event or a future podcast. Much love.